Hello everybody, this is KnowYourMac on YouTube.com, and in this episode we're going to be going over a bunch of different jQuery concepts. So in this episode and a few episodes after this, we'll be taking a look at this to-do list and making it super functional. Now here I've already created a simple unordered list with a few list items, and each one of these list items has a button that says delete. We won't actually be working with the delete button today, that will be in a future episode, but we will be working with adding new items to this to-do list today. So the first thing we want to do is we want to insert some HTML. So the first thing I'll do is I'll create an input here, and the type is going to be text, and that's how we create an input. And this is a self-closing element. Actually all inputs are self-closing. And we're also going to make a button here that will say add. And you can see we have our simple input where we can type things, and then the add button. Now we do want to give both this input and the button an ID because we're going to be using them in JavaScript. Now in jQuery we can just say input for our CSS selector as we've done in the last episode, but we do want to give it an ID just in case we have other inputs on our page later. So I'm going to say new text. And the button, we'll set this to add. That's good. Now we're going to go ahead and pop into our scripts.js, and I'll remove this line that we made in the last episode. And what we want to do first is we want to assign something to happen when this button is clicked. Now with regular JavaScript, we used to use the onClick attribute on this element. And we can still do that. It is possible to just use onClick. But in jQuery, it makes it a lot easier for us to just assign it in JavaScript. And really, onClick is not good HTML code because it gets in the way, and you might be having to search for it later. And it's just better if we keep all of our events bindings in our JavaScript file. So to bind a function to this button, what we want to do is first target that button. So I'm just going to use hashtag add. Because that is the ID of this button here. And we're going to use the on method. Okay, again, we want to put these open and closing parentheses and a semicolon at the end. Now the on accepts multiple values. When we're using it like this, the first thing it's going to accept is a string, which is the events, and then a function. So for the events, we're going to be using the click event. Now you can basically use anything in here. You can use click, hover, mouse down, mouse up, a bunch of different things that you can use in here, but we won't need any of them except for click right now. And for the function, we're going to have to create a function later, and let's just say that function is going to be called add list item. Now in this jQuery syntax, we actually do not need to put the opening and closing quotes at the end of this function because it's not actually using that function until later. So now we're done with that. We can just save this. And now we do have to create a function called add list item. Now we can create this function up here, and it does not have to be within our jQuery document ready function because add list item is not going to run until this button is pressed, so we don't have to worry about putting it in here. Now you can, if you want, define the function right after it like that, but it's just personal preference. I'd rather not. I'd rather have all of my event bindings in this document ready function and then all of the actual things that they do outside here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the text that's inside the input. So we want to get whatever the user typed in there. So let's go ahead and define a variable. We'll say var text equals, and we're going to use our other selector here, and we're going to make this, what do we set this to? New text. And in order to get the text that's inside an input, we use .val, the val method. And that val just returns whatever text is inside that input. So just to test this, I'm going to say alert the text. And if we refresh this, and we type some stuff in here and click add, you can see it alerts that text. So that's good, it's working perfectly. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually add that text into our unordered list here. So in order to do that, we're going to use a selector for the unordered list. So why don't we give this unordered list an ID just in case we have more unordered lists in the future. So set it to to-do list. So we're going to use our selector for to-do list, and we're going to use the append method. And append, what it does is you can put in a string in here, and that string will be inserted right before this closing tag. So you could see that if I put in append test, and we go ahead and try this, you can see test comes up in here after everything else. So similarly, we can append a list item. And now if we check this out here, we get test. So that's working well. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to, instead of putting test inside this list item, we want to put in the text variable. Now I don't think we've been over this before, but here we have a situation where we need to combine the string li with the variable text with the string /li. So the way we do this is if we just separate the strings like that, you can see we have one string here and one string here, and we could actually add with the plus sign variables and text. So if we put in plus text, and then we'll put in another plus after that, it's saying take the string li, then add the variable text to that, and then put this string in there as well. So now if we go ahead and check this out, you could see that it's inserted here perfectly. And you can see that if we check out the code in here that was inserted, it inserted our li just as we wanted it to. Now we would also like to put in that delete button again, so I'm going to go ahead and select that and just paste this in this string. And you could see now if we try adding another to-do item, it puts it in perfectly with that delete button. And we could just add as many times as we want, and that function will continue to work. Now one more thing we want to do, which we might as well do while we're here, we want to clear this input out, because normally if someone added a wash dog to-do item, they don't need to add that item again as we've done multiple times here. So we might as well just, whenever we click this add button, this should be blank so that someone can come in here and type in again. So in order to do that, we want to go ahead and use another selector to select that input, which was new text. And we're actually going to use the val method again. Now val by itself, as we have up here, without anything inside of the parentheses, it will return whatever is in that input as we have done with this variable. But if we pass a string to this val, I'll just pass a test, then it's going to set the text of that input to whatever we've put here. So now we can actually see, if we just test that out, you can see it was set to test. So we're just going to give it an empty string, which we can do with just an opening and closing quote there. And you could see that now, if we add wash dog, it clears out that input so that we can add another thing in just as easily. So I hope this has helped you to see some more of what we can do in jQuery. And in the next episode, we'll take a look at how to actually use these delete buttons.